You were on there, weren't you?
It was the coach from Furman or from Houston.
Oh, it was so funny. So, all right. Here we are. Welcome to the Next Play podcast. We have a very special guest today. The Next Play podcast is we are trying to help people overcome mistakes in life and in athletics. I've got my co-host here for the next few weeks, and Adam Nelson. And Adam is he is substituting for Greg Stewart, who is in the midst of a #1 in the country run as Oregon Tech softball coach right now. Adam, how about that? They've won 18 straight and they're #1 in the country. He is hopefully will be with us at some point to talk about that. So Adam, I'm going to let you introduce our special guest today. And I'll be honest, I'm a little intimidated, and I'm usually not, and I'm kind of nervous, so I'm talking real fast. So go ahead, Adam.
Well, thank you very much. It's my honor to introduce this guest. So this is a close friend, Greg Ottey. Now, I'm told I'm not allowed to look at anything, and I'm a note taker, so this is unfair.
Yeah, it's off the top of your head.
Yep. But I did a little preparation prior to. So as I go down this bio.
So let me to the listeners, if this is your first episode, which why if it is, but second, so I always, when we have guests, we do the bio. I'll introduce, if it's my guest that I know, I'll tell their bio without looking, without preparing, and seeing how much of it I get right. And then the guest will tell me what I got wrong. All right, go ahead, Adam.
All right. So again, Greg Ottey, this is retired Brigadier General, the United States Air Force. Okay. This is and this information is relevant as of 2015, Greg. All right. So when I looked at airforce.gov, that's what I got. All right. So okay. He retired, I believe, in 2017, but I'll okay. And
that's good. You're not looking down. We've got the video of this too, so you're not looking down. I'm impressed. Keep going.
I'm not looking down. So he lives in Rocky Mount, North Carolina currently. Prior to that, he was in Delville, Virginia with his wife, Lisa, 2 dogs.
Delville is near DC, I guess.
Near Roanoke.
Roanoke. Oh, my bad. Okay.
Yeah. 2 dogs. Stayed right next to a really, really good looking individual named Adam Nelson.
So you guys were neighbors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
neighbors.
Right. Yep. Youngest son, Chris, was still around at that time. He was finishing up high school. And I believe his oldest son, Jake, just graduated from Alabama at that time. So he's an avid golfer. But I'm going to go all over the place here with his bio. But he graduated from VMI. And again,
I looked at your bio. So I think you graduated in 1988.
87.
87. Okay.
Yeah, I went into the Air Force in 88, graduated in 87. It's a little bit of the story, but yeah. Gotcha. Graduated VMI in 87, went in the Air Force in 88. That's where you see the 88.
Gotcha.
So he was awarded a number of medals. I mean, if you go on this guy's bio, it makes you feel really bad about your life. When you read all of the distinguished medals that he received, one of which was the bronze medal, which is very hard to get. It's an act of valor. You have to do something heroic in a combat zone. There was a lot to that. If you Wikipedia that's like, wow, this guy's done something pretty impressive. And there's a number of other medals, and I can't remember it because you're making me look right at the screen and not down at my notes, Coach. So he'll clear that up for me. He flew the C-17. He flew the Super Hercules and the Hercules.
Okay. So C-17, you're speaking in tongues. Like, I don't know what that is. And
let me tell you what this is.
I'm assuming that's pretty badass. Excuse my language.
It is the biggest military plane, and I'm talking from civilian talk, but this thing is huge. It does everything, right? So it has, guns, bombs, but it transports troops. You can put tanks, you can put crazy stuff in the back of this thing, and it opens up its jaw and it just drops off these things with parachutes. I watched a YouTube video before this episode here. So he was the dude. And he was the guy in charge of doing, I saw 20 different assignments on your resume. I don't know how many hours you spent in the sky, Greg. But anyway.
So General, and Adam, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. This is a thing for me. I can't help it. And I interrupt people. So General, I think the number one question people have at this point is Top Gun. How much of it's, I mean, Top Gun's for the Navy. What do you Air Force guys, how do you feel about that? I mean, why do they get all the credit? That kind of bothers me a little bit for you. I'll be honest with you.
The Top Gun is awesome. It is the Navy's really good at publicizing, some of the things that they do, and that is an awesome. Both of those movies were awesome. Top Gun is an official school that the Navy has, and what we have in the Air Force is called the Weapons School, and they're right along the same lines, and that's teaching folks, doctorate level combat employment of their weapons system, and that's what those are about.
Wow. All right, that's pretty cool. All right, Adam, keep going.
I digress with the bio. I feel like, well, what he's currently doing is and this is a cool job, Coach. So he's the vice president of leadership development at Barnhill Company. I think it's based out of North Carolina. So I'll digress with that, Greg. Where did I screw up?
Adam, you're spot on, and like anybody usually does an intro, you make me look way better than I am. But in most bios, especially when you read them from a perspective of not being there, they're hard to understand, especially when you get into the military jargon. Just like Coach said, what's a C-17? What's a Hercules? Well, big picture. Yeah, I spent 29 years in the Air Force. I flew airplanes. I flew coach, what we like to call tactical airlift. So our lot in life was, you take Iraq, you take Afghanistan. Our strategic airlift, C5, C-17 was a strategic airlift, gets the materials, the people into the theater, and then we're like the bus or the truck that flies them around and gets them from place to place. And in the C-130 world, we have a couple primary missions. We do airdrop, so we airdrop people. We can parachute people into places that need our services. We airdrop equipment.
And when you say people, you're talking all branches. You're talking special forces, all those. So y'all have to work closely together. Now, what made you choose to? Obviously, being a pilot is not that easy. But how? What made you choose to be a pilot of a big plane rather than the little plane, I guess?
Well, that's a pretty easy story, and it's part of getting knocked down type stuff. But as a young man, I looked up one day and saw an airplane, and I said, I wonder what it takes to do that. And I didn't know. I was pretty good at the game of football, recruited by the Naval Academy and recruited by Virginia Military Institute, and I wound up at VMI because they gave me an opportunity to fly. They paid for my education and said I could go in the Air Force and possibly be a pilot if I qualified. When I got to pilot training, man, Coach, I was behind. The jet was way in front of me and I was way behind it. I tell folks we have a thing in the military called DG, and you might have heard of that before. It's called Distinguished Graduate, which means you graduate in the top 10% of your class. Well, Coach, I was a DG, but my DG stood for did graduate, and not in the top third of the class. I was actually in the bottom third of the class.
Yeah. Well, Adam, I don't know if he told you, he majored in procrastination and minored in plagiarism. I don't know if he ever told you that.
Coach, plagiarism is nothing but a form of flattery. You know that, don't you?
There you go.
So when it came time, I was going to fly what we call heavies, but I wanted to fly a C-130, and specifically, I wanted to come back to Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina. I wanted to get back to the East Coast, and that's how my career started. Flying airplanes.
So you're originally from North Carolina, then?
Originally from Roanoke, Virginia, where Adam said Daleville was, up there in the Shenandoah Valley.
Wow. Now, where'd you go to high school in Roanoke?
I went to Northside High School. I was a Viking, Northside Vikings.
So obviously you were a good football player. Now, did you play football at VMI?
That's the reason I went. Yeah, they recruited me and gave me a scholarship to play football, and I played football for them and studied civil engineering and took Air Force ROTC, and all of that merged together, and I'm here today.
So I've got, my background with VMI is, well, first of all, didn't get in, but second of all, I've worked with VMI's basketball team. And the VMI basketball coach is now here in Chattanooga. So one of the guys that I've worked with is Jake Stevens, who graduated from VMI, And now he had to transfer from VMI, Adam, because VMI doesn't have graduate transfers. So
Right.
he's got this extra year because of COVID, graduates with honors at VMI, and has one offer out of high school, and that's to VMI. That's it. I'm talking no D2 stuff, anything. Goes to VMI, is player of the year in SoCon or up there, and now he transfers with his coach down in Chattanooga. So incredible story Jake is, and he's probably going to play in the NBA. So anyway, and so I've been to VMI several times and worked with them a little bit, and it's fascinating what those athletes, to be an athlete at VMI is again, I mean, they get up at, like, I do all these clinics, and this is not about me, I need to remind myself, but I do all these clinics at places, and I say, petty problems are going on the road and traveling. And they were like, Coach, we love going on the road.
Yeah.
Yes. We get to sleep in. It was so unique. So anyway, I have so much respect for that place. Adam, were you on the team that we almost beat VMI and then said got hurt? Like, were you there?
No, I was not.
Yeah, anyway, that's a whole different story anyway. All right, General, sorry. So VMI, that is playing football there. I mean, and ROTC training and getting up at 7 a.m. and doing the usual VMI stuff.
Yeah. Well, Coach, the thing about it for sure is I didn't have to wonder what I was going to do any minute of the day because it was already planned out for me. When I was getting up, when I was going to class, when I was eating, when practice started, when practice was over, when I studied, when the lights went out, and when I got up and did it the next day. And then the weekends, there wasn't a whole lot to the weekends.
How hard was it to play there? I mean, what position were you?
I was a tight end. I'll give you kind of a story, Coach, that will kind of let you know a lot of what you're talking about. So I studied civil engineering, and civil engineering has to have 3 semesters of calculus. And I wasn't very good at calculus. As a matter of fact, I was so good at calculus I got to take it over again in summer school. So that's how good I was at calculus. Yeah. But I used to study for calculus because when I went, Coach, we had classes on Saturday morning from 8 a.m. to noon. So I had a calc class, the one that I got to take over again in summer school. I had it at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. So I would go Friday night in the library to study calculus to be ready for a calculus class and homework or whatever. And the library at VMI is not air conditioned. So I'd open up one of the windows just to get a little breeze in the library. And literally Washington and Lee, a normal college, is about 100 yards away from VMI. I mean, there's literally
for those of you, they're connected. It's almost like you're on one campus. Yeah.
So I'm sitting in the library, window open, studying calculus. And Coach, I can hear the fraternities throwing keggers down the road and the music playing and knowing that there are people out on this Friday night having a good time, and I'm in the library studying calculus. So that kind of tells you the regiment of what happens at VMI.
Did you keep that structure, that the almost, one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next? Did you keep that after you retired, or have you done that so long in your military career and even in college that you said, you know what, now that I'm retired, I'll play golf when I want to. If I want to sleep in, I'll sleep in. If I want to have the steak, I'll have the steak. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, what's your lifestyle like now? Is it still regimented like that?
What time did you get up this morning too?
I slept in good. Okay. I slept in good. I probably didn't get up to about 7, but most mornings I'm up at 5, Adam, I am not as regimented as that. I've always been kind of regimented. I like a schedule. I like to know what I'm going to do when. But now I'm to the point that I'm trying to be a little bit better about me. We can talk about that when we get into leadership and what my philosophy on leadership is, if we want to go there. But yeah, I'm not as regimented as I used to be. Definitely not like VMI regimented.
So you're playing football there. Now I've heard that the athletic practice is one of the easiest parts of your day at VMI. Or am I right on that?
Your comment about traveling and getting to go away is spot on. I can remember as a rat, and that's what they call VMI freshmen, is a rat. So your freshman year, you're not even a class, and they call you a rat. I can remember, Coach, someone coming by and picking me up and taking me down the road just to get a bite to eat, to go to a restaurant. And driving in the car and just seeing things go by felt so good to me, because I'd been in a regimented system where, the days went by. The days do go by fast, but it is like Groundhog Day.
Mhm.
Wow. That's amazing. And
I'm
football practice.
wondering, as part of that, is part of the regimen so that when you are flying in a combat zone and you have this $80 million machine, you have all these, military assets, mainly the people that you're going through. Is it just because you can get so locked in on the process, on what's next, and it almost you can compartmentalize and just block out all the pressure, everything else around you, and you're just locked into the process?
Yeah, Adam, that's so true. Part of the military training that you get, and VMI started that with the regiments that they teach you is, discipline, grit. We had checklists in the airplane for everything, and you're right. If you got with a crew, because we had done it so many times, and we did it to a standard way, because we got checked by evaluators to see that we could fly the plane to safety and standards. That regiment kind of carried through into the military, into the checklist that you're required to fly an airplane, into the discipline to work with a crew in an aircraft. And then when things got, rough, tight, in a bad situation, it was almost like second nature, because you'd done it every time. You knew if this happened, this is what you do. And then everybody knew what their job was to help solve that. So it is the regiment, the discipline, and the standardization are key.
So when you under stressful situations, and maybe obviously we can't talk about the most stressful situations you've had in those where you got the Bronze Star, all that. I mean, how did you keep your focus? So that training really was obviously helped you through that, right? That's why you do it. So
yeah, I think that once again, it goes back to that checklist, and you'll see, like this morning, I wrote down a checklist of things that I think, I ought to be prepared for, this call.
yeah.
But that's what helped me. And that's why we do it in the military. There's a checklist, a reg, a procedure for everything. And that standardization. I've heard a Marine Corps general give a talk about, why are the ribbons on the Marine Corps uniform an eighth of an inch above, the pocket flap?
Yeah.
And he said, we made that up. And we made that up because we wanted you to have an eighth of an inch, not an eighth, not a quarter, not 3/4. We wanted it an eighth of an inch. And they will actually pull out a ruler and measure that to see that it is. And it teaches you, discipline, standardization, and adherence to regulations and rules.
So what's the thought process? I go back to it. Obviously, every coach has a plan going into a game. Boom, boom, boom. And we used to always say, hey, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, the old Mike Tyson line, which I'm sure wasn't ever mentioned in the military. So what about getting punched in the face? How does the training help?
So this is what we use, coach. It's the same kind of thing. Your Mike Tyson says everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. We say, we have a plan, but the enemy gets a vote. And as soon as the enemy votes, then you've got to be able to adjust, to what the enemy input made, and you've got to carry on with because we start with what we call commander's intent. The commander's intent is to seize this objective, go get this, and here are your boundaries to play within. And when you get that, then you take all your training, and then when the enemy votes, you go, okay, the enemy's voted, I can't do that anymore, but I can stay within the commander's intent and achieve my objective by doing this. And we call check 15 right, 20 right, and keep going.
I feel like that's the name of this podcast, Adam. We're not going to get any better than that, right? The enemy has a vote. Everyone has what was the exact quote? The enemy has a plan, but you have a plan, but the enemy has a vote. Is that
right? Yeah, it's just kind of like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So
that's so good.
We start with a plan, and people go, well, why do you plan so much? Well, if you've got a plan, you have something to audible from. You can put this into football. Peyton Manning walks to the line. They know the play. The enemy makes a vote. That's the defense set up to do something, and it's different than what that play that Peyton had called, and he omahas, to whatever, and they move. Well, we do the same thing in the military. We create the plan, enemy votes, and then we omaha to what will continue to make our plan successful.
Here's something for both of you all, just one being a coach and Greg, obviously, with your military experience, what we're talking about here. The people that deal with performance anxiety, whether it, and we'll use sports right now as the example, right? Because there's probably a lot of young athletes listening to this that the coach works with across the country here, that when you have performance anxiety, what you've done through in repetition gets scattered. The what if comes into play. Your focus is away from what's happening in the present moment and into where the boogeyman's lurking or what. And so people get tense. I mean, Van de Velde, makes a couple bad decisions on 18 at the British Open, right? And fill in the blank of when that's occurred. Are you saying that if you have not just repetition, but if you have enough audibles and enough regiment and enough structure, it's going to reduce the amount of that scatteredness or that anxiety, right? Is that basically the summary of what you're saying?
Yeah, you can apply it that way, Adam. We called them branches and sequels. So we would create a plan, and this was the main focus of the plan, and this is how we were going to execute. And then as the enemy voted, we had branches and sequels. Well, if this happens, I'm going this way. If this happens, I'm going this way. And I have, I guess you'd call it anxiety too. I grew up in a time where they didn't diagnose it like maybe we do today, which was sad for guys like me. So I learned to deal with it through preparation, and then having okay, if this doesn't work, this is where I'm going, and I always have a backup to the backup to the backup.
So good.
So really, and mental health is a huge deal, but basically what we've got here is three guys, two that have a little OCD and one that's got really bad ADHD. So we got some issues.
We got the gamut. Yeah.
So, all right. So you're at VMI, you're in, so take us from you're flying airplanes, you're doing these great things. And then you move to the Pentagon, Adam. Where were we there?
That's right. Yep. You had a couple, was that 2015, Greg?
Yeah. So I had a stint in DC where I was, the family was there for 5 years in DC. I was there for 4, so my time during that 5 years at DC was, a couple years in the Pentagon with a couple very interesting jobs there as a colonel in the Air Force. And then I was, you say fortunate, and you guys are going to look at me and go, why do you think that's fortunate, Greg? But I was probably the best military assignment I ever had. I was sent away overseas to Kabul, Afghanistan, and I worked in the embassy for a year. Worst family year of my life, but best military professional year, Air Force year of my life. And then I came back, and you guys will get a chuckle out of this because all my high school friends are still laughing, but they brought me back to DC, and I worked at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency there in DC, and I was responsible for an organization that oversaw the nuclear stockpile of the United States. And my buddies in high school still chuckle at that they let Ottey anywhere near, a nuclear weapon, type thing. So,
Wow.
that's kind of my 5 years at DC encapsulated.
So you were in charge of getting rid of our weapons in a sense. I mean, how much can you even say about that? I guess.
Well, I mean, a lot. You could look up in bios and things when I was in that position, and it'll tell you what we did. But big picture we were responsible for the safety surety of the nuclear weapons. So we weren't necessarily trying. There were parts that were trying to work with other nations to reduce the nuclear stockpile. We were trying to ensure that it was safe. If it had to be called on, it would work. So we would inspect it, we would oversee it, and we'd make sure that it was doing what it needed to be done.
So how did you like that? I mean,
all the mountainsides are like
what's
all
that?
those things that we see that the mountain opens up and shoots nuclear weapons. Like you had a map of that stuff, Greg.
Well, there's a triad to our nuclear system. So we've got land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles all over, and some of that's what you're talking about there. They're down in silos deep in the ground. And then we have our submarine-based launch missiles that the Navy oversees, and then we have our airplanes that will fly nuclear weapons. And once again, the plan there is there's 3 ways that we can always ensure that if somebody thinks that they're dumb enough to do something nuclear to us, we've got an option, because we got boats. In other words, we got submarines out there cruising around, and they don't know where they're at. We used to have airplanes on alert and flying all the time. We don't do that, but we have airplanes ready to go. And then we have missiles on call in the ground, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So it is.
So how did you go from being a pilot to this, I guess, intelligence and organizational, all those things?
Yeah. So the one thing the military does to you is about the time you feel comfortable in what it is you're doing as a leader, they move you to the next thing.
Do you think that's good or bad?
I think it has a little bit of both, Coach. There's some goodness to it. What was great for me was, and I think this is kind of where you were headed, I came in as a C-130 guy, and, you know, I could probably spell nuclear maybe 8 out of 10 times correctly, but, you know, so I didn't have a vast background. I was a nuclear, I was a safety officer for a place that had nuclear weapons. So, I knew a little bit about it, but I brought the perspective of fresh eyes, a C-130 set of eyes, and I would ask questions, and they'd look at me and they'd go, you know, no one's ever asked us that question. That we really probably ought to look at that, you know. So that was the goodness of it. But the fact that you're changing so often, you know, you can't be as deep. And that's why they call, if you look at general officers, that's why they call them general officers, because they're generalists. You know, they're not going to ever be deep in one subject. They've learned to go from place to place and lead effectively that organization through leadership more than pure, you know, being able to take a weapon apart and put it back together type stuff.
That's what I'd like. Yeah, I'm sorry, Coach.
Well, I was just, you know, applying this to basketball. Like sometimes, like you get at the Division I level where there's 97 people on staff and everything. And so you're at some point, you're spending 2 hours trying to guard an under out of bounds play, when the big picture of things, like you can't even guard a ball screen at all. And I'm like, you know, what are we doing here? You know, and I would imagine it's probably similar in the military. Sometimes somebody with some outside eyes will be like, well, maybe you just need to rebound here. You know, I mean, they just, like, you're digging into the most. And so I do think there's probably some similarities there. Like, hey, have you ever thought about, so people would make suggestions to me and I'd be like, shut up. And then I'd be like, they're probably right later on. So stupid.
Coach and Adam, you know what I think another word for that is, and I don't mean this in the woke sense, but it's diversity. Right. You know, and that's and the way I take diversity is just more than the color of your skin, your religion or whatnot, is that you have a different thought process. You see things differently, and we can learn from people that see things different than we do if we take the time, you know, to listen to them.
Wow, that's great.
They said in the Bin Laden raid prior to that, when McChrystal got the gang of SEALs together and they were talking, there was somebody that was a part of that wasn't a part of the SEAL team, but they allowed him a seat at the table as they were mapping out the process in their kind of, you know, their makeshift like at scale compound. And the guy walks up, and they had been working on this. I mean, already done the rope, getting off the helicopter from the rope. They were training at tendonitis and the whole deal, and they were ready to rock and go over there. And he was like, well, what happens if the helicopter breaks down? And they had worked so much on exactly how it needed to be that this random guy handed the coffee out to the team. So what happens if that helicopter breaks down? And sure enough,
it did.
It broke down on the coffee.
In a big way.
That's awesome.
And so that diversity of thought, right? Like that's so it's so cool. Just somebody with that, you said it, hey, I have the C-17 perspective, and now they're going to make me involved in the leadership of nuclear arms and protecting those things. That fresh perspective sometimes is the difference between life and death and success and failure.
Yeah.
So Adam, that's really good. And I need to be a better co-host with you. That's really good. And so I've interrupted you 3 times, and I do that. I do that to the other guy too, General. So General, how does you've been at VMI, you're a civil engineer, you're obviously one of the most detailed people on earth. So at the Pentagon, how are you dealing with politicians who they don't really get outside themselves? I mean, how does that work? How do you deal with civilians in general?
Yeah, it can be frustrating, but once again, that's what makes our military so great. We know who we work for.
Yeah.
And
is
that
incredible.
that is a civilian control.
Yeah.
Our lot in life is to give our best advice, and then they make decisions. And I'll tell you a story, Coach, because I worked for the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force when I was at the Pentagon. So I was his senior exec, and his lot in life was to help the Chief of Staff, the number one guy in the Air Force, put together the budget.
Yeah.
And we would put together the budget, and we'd have reasons for everything we wanted to do. And we could go, this looks good. And then the general would take it, what we call across the river, the Pentagon, drive over to, where Congress was at, across the Potomac, and would present it. And then it would get chopped up based on what each congressional district needed, to make themselves look good and get something in their area. And what you would come back with is broken glass, is what I used to call it. You come back with broken glass, and you got to put all that glass together and make it the best you can. And people go, that's got to be frustrating. Yeah, it's frustrating. And, our way of democracy, when some people look at it, go, well, that's crazy. But I will tell you, it's the best crazy in the world, because of the freedom that we have and understand. And so I kind of looked at it from that perspective. This might be frustrating, and it might be, hard, but it's the best hard in the world. And if you spend a year in Kabul, Afghanistan, you will quickly understand it is definitely the best crazy in the world, because that crazy over there is beyond crazy.
Anything you can share about that experience to help us realize how blessed we are to live?
Yeah. So my lot in life over there, Coach, was I was the liaison to the ambassador, and the ambassador at that time was James Cunningham. And so I lived in the embassy, and I had a staff of about 22 liaisons, military officers, and enlisted, that we helped state understand military, and then we went back to the military and tried to explain what state was doing, because they're two different entities working together, but two different entities. And General Dunford was the man running he was the ISAF commander, man running the war over there. And that's really who I worked for. If you talk about a solid line, my solid line went to him, and my dotted line went to the ambassador. And I would fly around with the ambassador everywhere he went. He wanted his one star to go with him. And we would go to all the provincial places. We'd sit on the floor. We'd eat with the provincial governors, and we'd talk about things like elections and that kind of stuff, and bringing true democracy and freedom to Afghanistan. But to do all those things, we'd have to leave the embassy. There would be an armed car in front of us, an armed car behind us, and he and I in an armed car, to get to the airport. And when you drive through Kabul to get to the airport, it looks like a free-for-all, because there are trucks, cars, there's no stoplights, there's no stop signs. You get your nose in first, it happens, and you look at this, there's, you go back to a guy that's regimented, likes details, likes, things like that. This is just crazy to me. These guys know how to drive so they can get in and out. But one of the strangest things I would see is, not strange, but it makes you feel and understand our freedom, Coach, is the little shops along the roads that would get to the airport. They would push all the trash out into the street. And I would ask, why is the trash there? Well, the goat herders then would bring the goats through the streets, and they'd eat that trash, and that was their trash service. So you go, okay, that's how they pick up the trash, and we know how we do trash. You can quickly come to a conclusion. We're just blessed to be Americans.
Wow,
that's just one of many stories that
that's amazing. It really is. Go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, you had brought up leadership philosophy a little bit earlier, and you just hear these stories. I mean, I could sit here we may need to do like a 7-part episode, Coach.
Yeah, no doubt.
With this,
no doubt.
That leadership philosophy that you were discussing, like, how is that perspective? First off, what is it, if in a sentence or in a paragraph?
Sure.
What does that look like now? And then 2, how much of that perspective and your time away from America in that type of environment, how did that kind of shift or mold how you see leadership and how you lead people now?
Sure. So I've done what I do is I teach leadership. So when I retired out of the Air Force, I'm going to get you here, Adam. Just going to take me a few seconds to get you there. When I retired out of the Air Force, they send you through a class, to help you do the transition to go from being a military guy to a civilian guy. And one of the first things they do in the class is they ask you to stand up and say, okay, you're getting ready to go be a civilian and you're going to get another job. If you could be anything in the world you wanted to be, what would you be? And when my turn came, I stood up and I said, I'd like to be a high school football coach. And they all looked at me and they said, well, Greg, go be a damn high school football coach. And I said, well, my boys and my wife have sacrificed a lot. And, I'd like to give them a little more financially and whatnot than what a high school football coach can give them. But that's what I want to be. So I tell you that story to tell you, well, my current job, I'm the vice president of leadership and development at Barnhill. And my lot in life is to help Barnhill grow great leaders. Well, that's a coach, so I'm coaching, I'm just not coaching high school football. And so I tell you that story, and Barnhill is a values-based leadership organization, and we believe in values-based leaders. And Adam, you can call it what you want, because you and I have read on leadership, there's level 5 leader, there's servant leader, there's values-based leaders, and over the years that I've spent studying this, I've come to the conclusion, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to these, smart leadership gurus, but great leadership is great leadership. You can call it whatever you want to, you can call it VBL, you can call it servant leadership, you can call it level 5. Great leadership is great leadership. And that's what I try to practice. Does it have servant leadership in it? Yes. Is it based on values? Yes. Do I understand level 5 leadership? Yes. So, it starts, I say leadership it starts with you, but it's not about you. And believe it or not, it took me a while to learn that. And I really didn't learn a whole lot. One of the key aspects of leadership until I got out of the military.
Why do you think that? So why do you think that is on?
Because the military is not big on, Coach, one of the first things that you got to understand as a leader is yourself.
Yeah. Because
if you don't know yourself, you can't lead yourself. And if you can't lead yourself, how can you truly lead others?
Yeah.
So, it starts with a self-reflection in values-based leadership. And if you've got self-reflection, then you take time to understand who you are and what you're about. You've got strengths, you've got weaknesses, you've got values. Maybe you've got a purpose in life. I playing around with my purpose in life, and I know it doesn't sound real good to say playing around, but to ignite the potential in others by helping to grow great leaders. That's what I'm trying to do in my world right now. I wake up at 7 o'clock. If it's 5 o'clock, I've been up at 3 o'clock in the morning for this job if I have to travel. So, but that's what gets me up is that purpose. And then, so you do self-reflection and then balance. Well, the balance has a lot to it. It goes back to that diversity. Sometimes as a leader, we fail to walk around and look through the other person's glasses to try to see their perspective. Well, that balance is trying to have a balance of perspective across the board of those you lead and the situation you lead in. And then, the fourth, principle of the leadership Adam that I do is what I call true self-confidence. And, as a leader, if you don't have true self-confidence, then you're not genuine, and people will quickly pick it up. And you can determine real quickly with 2 questions whether you got true self-confidence. So you can ask yourself these 2 questions. As a leader, Adam and Coach, can you admit you're wrong to those you lead, to those above you, to those at your peer level? Can you admit that you're wrong? And then the second question, can you say, and have you ever said, I don't know? So leaders with true self-confidence can answer those questions, that I can do those 2 things. I can admit that I'm wrong, and then I can say, I don't know. Let's figure this out. Because we've all worked for leaders that were never wrong and always had an answer, whether it was right or not. They were going to let you know. And then the last one is genuine humility. And some people look at humility as, oh, that's a meek, meager, leader. They're not strong if they've got humility. Well, you define humility different than I do. For me, humility is thinking less of yourself and more of others. And that's a definition of humility. And when you wrap that all together, Adam, that's the leadership style that I wake up every day and try. But as you know, that's not easy to do, all of those things and put it together. But if you're always striving for that, then you're doing pretty good every day.
That's
I tell
pretty
you,
good.
I've got the first two down. I can say I don't know, and I can say I'm wrong. Now, so General, I'm writing a book right now, and I just had a book come out called The 10 Qualities of a Warrior. And if you haven't bought that yet, again, why not? 10 Qualities of a Warrior. It's out Amazon. If DM me, and we'll get you a copy a little cheaper if you like. So anyway, it's going to be a Pulitzer Prize winner, I'm sure.
All right.
I'm writing a book. I just started it this week. It's called Leadership Lessons from the 5 Worst Bosses I've Ever Had. It's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty good. So,
yeah.
All right. So anyway, so you're teaching, can you tell us why guys maybe in the military rise to the general rise to be generals like yourself, and then other people don't necessarily make it? What is it that maybe if you could even call it one quality or one sentence, what would it be? Would you say?
I think there are 2 key aspects to every leader that I look for if I'm building a team, because if I'm building a team, I want to build a team of leaders. I don't grow followers. I grow leaders. Yeah. And, because if you've got a leader and you give them an intent and there's a team of leaders, they'll figure out a way to solve it. But I think, Coach, and I'm sure you guys, I know, Adam, and you've heard of this, but I look for people with a high emotional quotient, an EQ. In other words, they understand themselves and they understand others. And then I look for, that humility in them. And, you take a guy like Adam, he would be a first round draft pick for teams because of his emotional quotient, his ability to understand the situation, to see. You can see how he handles himself on these podcasts. And I've been around him in multiple different situations. And then the last one would be, grit. And if you've ever studied on grit, there's a great book by Angela Duckworth on grit. But they've done lots of studies, and what you find, it's not the smartest that's always going to be successful, but if they've got a little bit of grit, and I will tell you right now, Coach, I'm probably the 3rd smartest person on this call today, but I do think I have a little bit of grit, and that's what helped me to get through things that I had to get through. I wasn't going to stop. I was going to find a way. I was going to figure it out. I was going to go over it. I was going to go around it. I was going to go through it. I know you talk about failure. I don't. If I told both of you that I've never failed in my life, you'd look at me and go, "That's a cocky man there."
You and Coach are very much aligned to this. Keep going.
Because it's not. It's the way I define failure, and failure is getting knocked down and not standing back up. And Greg Ottey has been knocked down a lot in his life, but I promise you, I've always stood back up in some form or fashion. So when I tell you I haven't failed, you got to understand my definition of failure.
Well, obviously, we need to write a book together, General. And, what I do, I'll go to different colleges, universities, and one of my keys is you got to redefine failure. What is failure? Failure is being scared to try, number one, or not learning from your mistakes. I say, those are the only 2 types of failure there really are. Striking out, that's not failure. Dropping a pass, that's not failure. And getting these, that leads to Adam and I have talked about anxiety with athletes, and I would love to get your perspective on this. My whole, you see these athletes opting out, and mental health's a real deal. And we've got to, I get help, and we're not mental health experts, but you have been in combat type situations, life and death situations. Okay, well, you know what? 4th and 1 in overtime, you're not charging a hill. You're not flying your plane in Afghanistan. I just want athletes to realize that, hey, paying your mortgage, that's pressure sometimes. Going through a divorce, figuring out your family, that's pressure. Can you touch on that a little bit? You're
Yeah.
not charging a hill. You're
Yeah.
not, I just really, it hurts me that athletes, they put that on themselves when it's a game.
Yeah, coach. So I've been in part of teams, organizations, whether I'm the leader or whether I'm someone there that's supporting. And I use this at Barnhill, and I use it all the way up through the president and the CEO. We'll get in a tough time, and you'll see things kind of tense up and pressure, and some people handle it well, some people not as much well. And if I see it getting too what I call kind of crazy, I'll say, hey, let's stop and let's look at this. Is anybody getting shot at right now? Okay. Yeah. All right. Are we right now, do we have to take anybody to the hospital because, something bad's happened? Yeah. No. Okay. Let's always do what's right and do our very best. And that's all we can ever do, yeah. And remember, nobody's shooting at us. And right now we're not having to take anybody to the hospital. So let's figure out how to handle whatever it is we got going on.
What's interesting is with anxiety, right? Like I saw something or read something that talked about human beings. So humans over the millions of years that we've been around, we evolved and have created this prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain that allows us and our body to experience things as if it is occurring to us right now. And it was a survival mechanism because, that dude kept running out of the cave and getting eaten by the saber-toothed tiger when he turned right. But you do that for a long period of time, and this part comes onto the brain, and then it says, what happens if I go and turn right? And then you feel this anxiety, your physiological response, that cortisol level spikes, the adrenaline, all those things that you feel biochemically are happening when you're sitting on your rock in the cave in preparation for what could happen. And so I think what you all have said, Coach, what you teach in these clinics on Be the Thumb and going through and hearing those athletes respond to that. And then what you've said, Greg, about regiment, about, just perspective and your stories you shared, a lot of that is kind of the elixir for that anxiety, because I can tell you, I've had anxiety and panic attacks brushing my teeth in the morning. I haven't been shot at.
What does elixir mean, Adam? For those
like a medicine, a medicine.
I know we're gonna have, like, if I don't know what it means, I'm sure some of our athletes.
I mean, but you know what I mean, right?
It sounded great. I was buying in, but then I'm like, everything I was like, I got to know what elixir is, or I can't really follow.
That may not even be the correct word. I just think it means medicine. But I'll tell you, when you really do, your body feels it, whether you're being shot at or not. Those people that deal with performance anxiety in sport or in life or dealing with an anxiety disorder, it's really happening to them, even though if you look at it, it's, if you look at what's really occurring, it's not near as bad. But perspective, regimen, kind of answering those fearful questions, some of the stuff that we've talked about, those are just great practical tools that somebody that maybe never will be shot at working can take away from them, right? Like that's worth the price of admission, is hearing how Greg's responded in his career, and then obviously what you've taught, Coach.
So in the moment, General, Adam, I mean, if you're having that bout of anxiety right before you step into the batter's box, what do you think would be some good things how to handle that? General, what do you think? Well, go ahead. Either one. Yeah.
I was going to summarize what the general told me, right? It is good practice, purposeful practice, where I think he described it as you have your intent, you have the goal, and then you have your branch offs, and just having that in the back pocket for when that situation, when you do feel that way, you already have it played out. So, I mean, that's something I've taken away just from this 30-40 minute conversation.
Yeah. How about it, General? What do you think?
Yeah, I think preparation, and I know that's hard because I've had anxiety, but probably early in my career, if Adam would have called me and said, "Hey, you want to be on a video blog?" I'd have said no. I'm too scared to do that. I might say something stupid. I might do something wrong. But the more and more I prepared, the more and more.
That's incredible to me.
Yeah.
So here you are, you've gone through VMI, and you're very humble, and you obviously, but most of us can't get a civil engineering degree from VMI while playing football.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty.
Yeah, I've had people tell me that, Coach, but when I look at it from my perspective, and I'm sure, when Adam talks about his anxiety, you always think that maybe it is part of my problem coming up was I wanted to always protect my image. And I realized as I learned more about leadership that that's not as important as how you help others. And really, as a leader, if they understand that you're vulnerable too, there's more chance that they're going to follow you than if they think you're perfect and they could never be who you are, And so I try to lead with a little bit of that, and not always successful. My boys will tell you I wasn't successful. As a father, I could have done a lot of things better and different. But it's kind of interesting that I'm 57 years old, and I'm really in the last 6 years truly learning about what this true leadership thing is, and how you go about doing it the right way.
Now, how about your children? You've got
3 boys.
Now, I've liked everything I've heard except that you let one of your children go to Alabama. I've got a problem with that. Hey, General, are you an Alabama fan? I hope not. Can you ask your son who won the Tennessee-Alabama game, by the way? And let me tell you, I said the next time Tennessee beats Alabama, I said, guys, I'm streaking. I said, I'm streaking. So we're at the beach, and everybody's reminding me of that comment. And so I go into the ocean and I take all my clothes off. I'm deep into the ocean, and I'm holding them up, and I'm running through the ocean, streaking in the ocean. It was.
I love Tennessee fans. No, I love Tennessee fans because they are fans. There's only one color, and for Tennessee fans. But so we traveled all over the United States. We moved every 2 years. So my boys, I got a question from them one time, Coach. Dad, where am I from?
Oh, bless her heart. Yeah. Hey, that's the same way in coaching, though.
Well,
it's the same way. My kids,
7
different bedrooms is what my son had in his first, 15 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So, but how I became an Alabama fan was, so we lived a year in Montgomery when I went to school there for a year. And, so when you cross the Alabama line, you have to declare,
Yeah, you
say, are you Roll Tide or are you War Eagle? Which one of these are you? And my son evidently became Roll Tide, but when he graduated high school, Alabama had a great program for the GI Bill, where I could give the GI Bill to Jacob, my oldest. He could get an education, and even though we were out of state, Alabama would pay for all the rest of it. So he essentially went to school, on my GI Bill, and Alabama was the place he chose. And I was never a big Alabama fan, but after you got one that goes there and you see the pride they have in it and what they do, and it's pretty easy to be an Alabama fan. It's tough maybe to be pick the low end team in the SEC. Sometimes it's tough to be one of those true fans. It's pretty easy to be an Alabama fan, because you just reload. It's like a shotgun. Let's just put a couple.
I do more work at Alabama than anywhere else. And I go and I'll tell those. I say, how hard is it? I said, you want adversity? I said, you want to persevere? Be a Tennessee fan.
See, that's what I mean.
But why is it fair for them to have the 2 greatest football coaches of all time? Is that fair, General? That's not fair.
And I'm sure you've seen that Walk of Fame down there where they put in those blocks of concrete with the team for all their national championships, and then the statues of all their coaches and the number of national championships that they've won. It's a pretty impressive place. Matter of fact, when I took Jacob through his orientation down there, I came back from Afghanistan to take him to orientation and went down there, and they wanted to go see the engineering schools. And I said, well, you guys go on and see that. That's good. I'm going to walk over to the stadium. I want to see the stadium. And that's when I saw the statues and all that, and I go, now this is a cool place,
Really. At game day there, the way they tailgate, it's unbelievable. Mason and I lost my card, Adam. It was when Cody blocked the field goal where Tennessee would have won.
Oh yeah.
And then we spent 3 hours trying to find my car. We were just absolutely.
You were at that game?
Oh, we were at that game, and as Tennessee fans. And Mason's like, he jinxed it. He's like, Dad, we're going to beat Alabama. I'm like, son, no. And I got to know the guy that got the field goal block, Daniel Lincoln. But anyway, all right. So, General, I know your time is very valuable, and I hope you will come do this again.
We got to.
Dude, this has been incredible. But let's finish up. I think the best way to finish up, Adam, is for you and the General to tell your golf story about the pink jacket. I see no other way to help people be better leaders than with the pink jacket story. All right, so here we go. And Adam, if this is your first episode, Adam is a former PGA professional golfer. So
Adam's a great golfer.
Yeah. So let's keep that in mind. All right, Adam, here we go.
Well, I'm going to let Greg tell the story, but what I will say, with the resume that we went over at the beginning of this call and everything that he has on his chest, when he wears his formal blues, the one thing he doesn't have is the pink jacket. And I do have that pink jacket. Got to have it in the closet for a year. But Greg, I'll let you tell how that came to be.
Okay. All right, Coach. So my dad, back in 1994, decided we'd get a bunch of people and we would go to Myrtle Beach and we'd play golf. And every year we'd get the Ottey family men and relatives and, anybody just wanted to go, and we'd go down there and play. And I think we got, let's see, we've had Dad, Matt, Adam, Matt, and Jake. So about 6 years ago now, we decided, hey, we need to commemorate this. And so I was, this time of year, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a green jacket, and you can see it there behind Adam. You can see the flag posted in the United States there in Augusta, Georgia, and the way it looks. And I said, well, got to thinking, I said, well, we need a way to memorialize this. And, we'll start with something like the Masters. So what is the exact opposite of a green jacket? Well, it's got to be something like a pink jacket. Who would want a pink jacket? So we'll get a pink jacket. And then we created a patch to go on the pink jacket that looks a lot like Adam's, except for instead of the state of the United States, it's an outline of South Carolina with the flag going through Myrtle Beach, because we always went through Myrtle Beach. Yeah. And then on the inside of it, we put a liner that you would sign if you win the jacket. So, we would go down 5 years ago. We had our first winner, which was my nephew, Matthew. So, I mean, it's actually almost like a marathon, because we play on Thursday afternoon. We play twice on Friday, 36 holes on Friday. We play 36 holes on Saturday. And then we have some kind of championship on Sunday.
Shocker that you would be, I've known you now for an hour. Shocker that you'd try to get 36 holes in a day. I mean, that's just totally shocking. So how do you do it with handicaps though? I mean, obviously, Adam,
that's the thing. We play a lot of team golf. But you get points based on, because each time the team rotates. So, you might win, 9 points with this team, and the next day you might win 3 points, and then the next day you might win 12 points, and each body gets points. And at the end, the person with the most points gets presented the pink jacket, keeps it for a year, signs it, and the things, it's just like a champion's dinner, because when we come back the next year, like this year, my son will have to buy the first round of drinks for everybody that travels, and he has to give a pink jacket speech. So it's kind of like the champion's dinner, So we just kind of plagiarized. Remember, form of flattery, kind of plagiarized what happened at Augusta. And matter of fact, my nephew Patrick just put out the invite, and it looks a lot like the invite, to Augusta that the pro golfers get. And then he does a bio on everybody, and he gives them power ratings. And, we just have fun with it. It's none of these golfers except for Adam are golfers, So
right. Yeah.
We
so how does he get? I mean, isn't it a little? Have you won it, Adam? How does it work? Like, what do you?
I won it.
How's that fair? I still don't see how you're making it fair for you.
Well, we make him hit from the tips, and
there you go.
Yeah, we're playing up, and
there's a blood alcohol level in play here too that we have to factor in. So
it's like the Joel.
Anything goes. Yeah.
Have you seen the Joel David documentary?
Yes, it's classic.
So all right, so you make it a little harder on Adam. I got you. So
yeah.
All right. Well, this has been incredible, General. I hope we can have you back, be a recurring guest. And when is the gauntlet? Have you guys already had it? The 2020?
It's actually no, it'll be in May, the end of May, right before Memorial Day weekend. That Monday, I think it's like 25, 26, something like that. Is it when we're going?
I feel like we need definitely have him on right after that. We can talk about the tournament. Maybe we can do a live episode in between rounds of the 18. I think that would be pretty good.
I'll record the pink jacket presentation so you can see it. I'll send it to you.
So, General, how can so your company right now? How, let's say, I mean, are you working with? I'm assuming you're probably working with Google and people like that. But I mean, what about a local high school coach? And I mean, how can they get in touch with you? And
yeah, so right now I primarily do stuff. I am an employee of Barnhill Contracting Company. I do some stuff around here with Kiwanis. I enjoy talking. I've done some stuff back in Roanoke where I spoke at the Chamber's annual meeting and that kind of stuff. If anybody wants to talk leadership, I'm all ears. And I'll share what I have. I've done some Civil Air Patrol stuff, Coach, where I go down and talk to those folks. If you don't know Civil Air Patrol, but think Civil Air Patrol is Boy Scouts for those people that want to fly. That's what Civil Air Patrol is. Yeah. It's an auxiliary of the United States Air Force. So you can get me at geody@aol.com is the email for me. And
he's on LinkedIn and Facebook too.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. So tell me Coach, and usually I'll let you in.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, promise me you'll do this again. And coming from you, I know that'll be a commitment that sticks. And that's awesome.
If you guys want to hear from me, we'll talk.
Yeah. Love it. All right, we'll do it. Well, thank you so much, Adam, as always. Thank you. And again, this episode was brought to you by One Heartbeat. If you haven't bought the 10 Qualities of Warrior, my question is, why not? So let's get that book. And until next time, General, thank you so much. And this was incredible.
Thank you.